We're not saying that you should blame yourself. We're not saying that you should allow it to happen again. But we are saying that every time you have a trigger, there is unprocessed material in there that you are unaware of. And in the case of us fighting, you were aware of the dance, but that doesn't mean you were aware of every square inch of the unprocessed material.
Hey, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
As you can see, yet again, we're on the road this week. Coming off of the Profiler training event.
Yep.
We're still in Florida, and we're going to be heading home soon, but we're here in this makeshift studio once again. So this week, we're talking a little bit about shadows and triggers.
Yep.
So one of the things that I've mentioned on a podcast in the past, we've talked about shadow work a lot, Antonia. And basically, I give people the encouragement. I say, listen, if you have a triggering moment in your life where you get triggered, something upsets you. I have these. I had one today. I had one just a few minutes ago. I'm starting to re-see these as like bad events in my life. And I'm starting to recontextualize them to myself as an opportunity to see something about myself I didn't see before. Like there's obviously some material that got surfaced through this triggered moment. And now I've got something I can look at and say, all right, well, this is maybe material, shadow material I didn't notice before. I can maybe do something about this. I can address it. I can maybe, work on it. I can understand it. I can get a hold on it. I can just see it, honestly. Mm-hmm. And often things that are in our shadow, that's why we call it the shadow. You can't see them. Mm-hmm. But this could be challenging for some folks. When they think about getting triggered, I mean, that sounds nice, Joel. Oh, go get triggered and then look at things in your shadow. But that isn't always fun. Like, it's not fun for me. When I was like just a few minutes ago, we were setting up for this and trying to get some stuff organized, and I'm a little uncertain. We're not in our normal studio, and I'm trying to do the settings, and I'm like, all the equipment came from the live event, and I wasn't certain about the settings on it, and I was like getting grumpy, and I'm like, why is this so hard? Why don't I know this? And I'm feeling like some angst. And I'm getting ready to kind of like emote strongly. And I know that would set us in a bad tone for this podcast. I'm like, I can't emote, but I feel like I'm upset right now. I'm getting triggered by this moment. And I said, well, I have an opportunity to manage this, work with it, and not make it a problem for the scenario we're in. I'm not going to let my emotions bleed over into this. That was really hard to do, actually. I didn't feel like that. I felt like emoting strongly. I'd be like, Antonia, why do I have to? And making it kind of your problem along with me.
Right.
But I knew that would put you in a bad state. You wouldn't be able to record. It would have been a really tough thing.
Yes.
So I got a hold of it. I didn't do it.
Thank you.
But again, I think that's hard for a lot of people. Just that idea of sitting with something that upsets you. Because I'm on the hunt to fix it externally. I'm on the hunt to go, well, I'll make sure that these settings are never off for our equipment. I'll keep track of it all. Like immediately I go into like problem solving mode. So I'll never feel this trigger ever again. I'll never have this bad experience ever again. And this is like a low level one. It's not even hard. Like it's nothing from my past or anything.
Yeah.
But I just go into prevention mode. How do you respond to these typically? Are these good for you?
I don't get triggered in the same way that you do in the context you're talking about. I would call that like an emotional regulation trigger.
Yeah.
And so I don't have as much issue with moment to moment emotional regulation, but when I do have an issue with it, I'm very bad at not just exploding. Because I don't pay attention to my emotions enough to have a lot of, I don't know, like capacity to do a keto on myself. I'm not like good at that. And so when I get really like sort of emotionally triggered and my emotional regulation is off, I'm pretty blamey. I'm pretty loud and explosive and blamey. Yeah.
Let me try this one.
Okay.
There was a time early in our relationship. This is a deeper trigger. Okay. One for me.
Yeah.
When we would be in an argument and you would leave the room and I would chase you out of the room and I'd be like, you don't get to slam the door or hang up the phone on me. I would chase you down and not allow you to escape. And I'd force like almost like a fight or an argument to happen. And you're like, listen, I'm in an energy of emotion right now. I can't even think. I'm not leaving to never come back. I'll be right back. I just need a moment to get some space from this conversation. And I went, oh, because my previous relationship with my first wife, she would literally hang up. If there was an argument she didn't like, she would literally hang up on me, or she would walk out of the room, slam the door. And that was it.
And that was it.
We would never revisit this topic ever again.
Right.
So I think that is often when we talk about deeper emotional triggers. Like there's one that's more low level regulation around like incidentals that happen, like that make me upset. But that one was deeply troubling because I'm like, oh, we're not going to have resolution.
Yeah.
Like immediately I went, we're not going to have resolution. This marriage is going to end too. It's going to be nothing but fights until the end. It's now just a matter of time. Like all this narrative and meaning all came to me in the midst of these disagreements. And we even had to develop some code language where you just say, I'm not hanging up the phone. I'm not slamming the door. I just need a moment.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay. I know she'll be right back to
Yep.
resolve this.
Yes. And
that's a pretty deeper trigger. That's a deeper trigger, I think.
For sure. And I definitely have those myself. I don't have as many emotional regulation triggers on a moment to moment basis, but I absolutely have like high level ones where I'm struggling to regulate my own emotions. And that kind of trigger I would call baggage, like from previous relationships. And I definitely bring in baggage from previous relationships. It doesn't take much. I mean, like if I'm seeking a feeling of closeness or intimacy and I get rejected because, I mean, between the two of us, like you might just be involved in something. You're like closing loops or at the end of a project or maybe focusing on details, which is always nerve wracking. And so if I come in seeking emotional closeness and you're in the middle of something, like a process that has nothing to do with emotional closeness, that can easily trigger thoughts of worthlessness in me or like, oh, I guess we aren't as close as I thought, or like nobody values me. Like that's definitely baggage I bring in from the past. But I think what you're mentioning right now is a really valuable it's a really valuable platform for this conversation around triggers and the shadow, because it immediately strikes me as there's different kinds of triggers. And the reason why we're focusing on this conversation in part because we have done previous podcasts on the concepts of triggers before and how valuable they are. They're incredibly valuable for anybody who's interested in personal development work or personal growth. And to go back to the definition that I always apply to personal development, to me, personal development just means accelerated maturity.
Yeah.
It's just it's a way for us to figure out the lessons life didn't teach us for whatever reason, because in that way, maybe our life was a little cushier, or because the opposite happened. It was actually really traumatic. And so we didn't learn a valuable lesson because we were so, like in our stuff or whatever. The point being that we don't, on all the many channels of life, we don't develop at the same level in every single channel. So, we're sort of stratified. It's like looking at a soundboard and some of the knobs are up and some of the knobs are down.
Yeah.
And personal development is an opportunity to do an assessment or an audit of ourselves and try to figure out which channels are sort of dialed down. Like what are the areas of my life in which I need to mature? And the reason why development is so great is because as opposed to allowing life just naturally to slap the shit out of us in that particular arena at the exact amount of slapping that we need, because maturing and development usually means that we're given something that's like slightly outside of our current comfort zone or slightly outside of our range.
Yeah.
And then we meet it, right? We do the hard, heavy lift of like meeting it and then learning all the right lessons. But if it's not enough, then we don't learn the lesson because we figure, well, we already knew it to begin with, right?
Yeah.
It's not a reach. If it's too far, we're demoralized. We feel like we failed. We can't take the right lessons unless we like really, really focus and I don't know, like maybe do a Vipassana retreat or something and spend 10 days like meditating on it. But it's hard to get the balance exactly right. And when we allow life to provide the circumstances for us, it doesn't always give us the ideal situation. But in personal development, we can set up our life or set up our circumstances to make it so that we do get that like sort of Goldilocks amount of challenge in whatever arena. We can reach out for something a little outside of our comfort zone and keep doing that until we, learn the right lesson in that channel and then accelerate our maturity in the sense of not just leaving it up to happenstance or life. It accelerates it because we can control it and then we can watch ourselves make progress. So the reason why I say all of that is triggers are this like really great way for us to accelerate our maturity. They give us these wonderful opportunities to observe parts of ourselves that might need a little bit of acceleration, right? It might need a little bit of attention or attunement. Now, recently in a podcast series that we did around careers and the shadow. We were particularly talking about the sixth function. We mentioned, I think, multiple times over those 3 episodes that triggers give us a great opportunity to observe how we're already using our sixth function, which
Yeah.
is quote unquote shadow material. And it also gives us an opportunity to observe when our boundaries have been crossed. And we got a comment from somebody who mentioned that they have INFP preferences, that we have to be careful about how we talk about that because it can sound like victim blaming, basically. If we
Yeah.
say, you got triggered, so this is an opportunity for you, like, or when you get triggered, go inside and figure out what shadow content is in there, or figure out what boundary was crossed. That you might be talking to somebody who is just experiencing something in life that was like legitimately
Sure.
triggered them to take an action that was aggressive or assertive, right? They actually are innocent, and that that they're just in a terrible situation.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is when I read that comment, I was like, you're not saying anything opposite of what we were saying. But I think the reason why it could appear as if it was a calibration is because we use the phrase trigger so casually in our modern language. We use it so assumptively that that I don't think we stop to define what we mean by the word trigger.
Yeah.
And I don't think that we actually stop to define what we mean by the word shadow either.
Yeah.
So we thought that this podcast could give us a good opportunity to talk about when we use the word trigger, what are we actually saying? And is using triggers as an opportunity to dive into shadow content, is that victim blaming, taking responsibility on the self when really you could have actually truly been victimized?
Yeah.
And what exactly is the shadow, and why are triggers so valuable for looking at them?
Yeah. So I'm a little embarrassed about what I said earlier about getting triggered around setting up equipment then. If that's how we're defining like shadow, deep work, trauma, like I'm like, oh yeah, maybe that's not triggered. Maybe I'm just bad at regulating my emotions when the stakes are high, or not the stakes are high, but like there's pressure on me or something. I don't know.
Well,
I'm kind of embarrassed about it. Like why should it even be emotional? Like what you're set up equipment, Joel? Why is it even emotional at all? Right? Like that's so I'm a little like self-judging around. Like I probably shouldn't be
using the word trigger.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Maybe it's too severe. And then
you should exactly be using the word trigger. Actually,
and I think it is appropriate to talk about the hanging the phone up or slamming the door.
Sure.
And the reason I think that is because I actually did have I think I've got some trauma around equipment, but that's just my thing. I did have real trauma in my first marriage. I mean, it was really bad. It was to the point where I think I'm still healing from it.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing that just came up to me, or for me right now, immediately as we've been talking, it's not in any notes, it just emerged through this conversation, is actually these might be categorically assigned. Meaning with the equipment, the trigger there, so we talk about the HAT model. When we're doing personal growth, usually it falls within the realm of 3 key areas, either healing, achievement, or transcendence, right? And healing is something I have to heal from. I have to make I'm broken, hurt, physical healing, but also emotional or mental healing. You have to heal from something.
By definition, healing, I think, is necessitated by a trauma.
Exactly.
Like physical, emotional, psychological, or whatever. Like the easiest way is like a sprained ankle is trauma to the body.
Absolutely. So you have to heal from it.
Right.
But then there's a category of personal growth that's achievement. It's like setting up my business. It's striving for something, setting goals, optimizing the self, right? And that's another form of personal growth. So one is healing things that are bad and wrong and broken and you need to heal from. One is achieving, and the other one is transcendence, letting something go to go towards something new. So you transcend one level of your life into another level of your life.
Yep.
And that requires us to give up something often in order to go for something new. And I bet you triggers fall into these 3 categories.
They do.
And the 2 triggers I talked about, I just realized are 2 different categories. The first one is really an achievement trigger. I'm frustrated that certain things aren't set up technically, and I've got to go and redo work that's already been done. Somebody else forgot to put something in a box and I'm frustrated. It's like, I just can achieve. It's just, and that's my instinct. Go try to fix it. So it's achievement. I go and I'm like, something surfaces, I get frustrated emotionally, and I'm like going to work to fix it. Now there might be trauma behind that too. That's my story, but that's just me being silly. But there's genuine trauma in the door slam, hang up the phone situation. That is actual healing. I'm still healing from it.
Yeah.
I still deal with some of those things in my first relationship. They still bother me from time to time. Now I think I'm past most of it, like 90% of it, but there's still stuff that emerges. So when we talk about that, that's a healing trigger for me. In other words, it early on, it hurt way more than it does now. Sometimes now you can still walk out of a room or say, I've got to get off the phone right now. And a little panic rises up, a little trigger moment comes. But I have enough history with you and me to know, okay, wait a minute. I've healed the trauma that caused it, or I've been healing the trauma that caused it. And I've seen you time and time again come back in the room or get back on the phone to resolve it. I know that this isn't you actually hang up the phone or slamming the door, even though I still have that. It's like almost an automatic response sometimes.
Yeah.
So I think these are, and then wouldn't know what I haven't thought about what a transcendent trigger might look like yet, but I think would you agree these categorically might fall in these three broad zones?
Yeah. I was realizing I was kind of talking over you as you were talking. And the reason why is because I'm like, oh no, I have definitions for all of these.
Oh, good. So let's jump into it. Let's get some more specifics then.
No, I'm glad that you've laid it out though, because I think that's one of the core complexities in all of this.
Yeah.
Is we're using the same word to mean different things.
Yeah.
And so in a very sort of Alfred Korzybski style, attunement to the conversation, I think that triggers need to be sort of assigned different, like what do we mean when we use the word trigger? So there's like a foundational definition, but then there's also categorical definitions.
So I'm going to play not devil's advocate, but like kind of the dumb person that doesn't really have the clarity yet. I'm going to embody that person and say, I need to understand fully what this person's INFP preference is before we get into the definitions. I just want to understand the perspective they're coming from and really understand it, and for the person listening or watching right now too. They're saying that if you walk out of the room and I feel the trigger of quote unquote hang up the phone, and the advice is, well, Joel, examine yourself and see why you feel that way, and maybe there's something you could do about it. Mm-hmm. This person is arguing that suggesting that to me is blaming me as a victim. In other words, it's not my responsibility. It's the person that victimized me, my ex-wife. That's where the work should be done. I shouldn't need to examine something or fix something in myself.
Right.
Again, I'm being very I'm being kind of dumb. I'm dumbing this down on purpose.
I don't think you're being, I don't think so. I think you're taking the position of somebody who is still trying to wrap their head around the premise.
Yeah.
I don't think that would be a dumb position at all. I think that this is a complicated subject with a lot of texture to it and a lot of layers.
So I just want to make sure I understand, because I don't want to project onto this person. Are they suggesting that when someone would say to me, let's say a third party, hey, Joel, when Antonia walks out of the room and you say she's hanging up the phone, and you feel triggered and emotional about that, and trauma arises in you, you might want to look at that. That's maybe something from your shadow emerging that you could address, you could heal, you could talk to a therapist around, you could work on that.
Right.
The suggestion is that if somebody made that suggestion to me, they're blaming me as a victim.
Well, I don't know. I can't, of course, represent the person who made the comment because it was a paragraph worth of words.
Of course, but in a general tone, is that kind of what we're...
I think that there's a desire for caution to not assume that somebody who is getting triggered by a situation, and again, we still have not defined trigger, which I'm eager to do so that we can get to the answer to what you're saying.
Suspended animation.
Right.
What's it going to be?
Because I think the definitions of these things help sort of create some clarity around that. But that said, I don't know if the person who left the comment would believe that that's an example of what they're talking about. Yeah. The example of quote unquote hanging up the phone, which has become that's our in speak for any time somebody feels like the other person is ending the conversation without ever readdressing it.
Sure.
And we can even fillet out what we ended up doing in order to get to the other side of it. So I don't know if that's what they were referring to, but I do think that it would be the caution would be if a person has gone through something that was very painful for them, and a situation without their permission, so to speak, brings up that or sort of the same feelings because they get revisited by them. Mm-hmm. That we have to be careful not to say, oh, the work is all done inside of you, or to say that if that's their shadow material.
Yeah.
Because the person may have, may have legitimately been victimized or exploited.
Yeah.
And so to say that that's just their shadow material means that you're putting the onus on them to do all the work or to figure it all out on their side, or that even the fact that they have a reaction in and of itself is somehow bad or wrong.
Yeah.
To say that that shadow material insinuates to them that they're somehow doing something wrong. And this is why I want to spend some time defining trigger and defining shadow. Because I think that this would be really helpful to answering that.
Absolutely. And I think this is good because let me create the confusion or the questions and then we can answer them. So let's get into some definitions.
It's a public service that you do, honestly. I love that you team me up to be smart because I think it seems like I'm the person who always comes with all the answers, but you do such a great job of playing like the other side.
You do such a good job of being a dumb guy, Joel. It's great.
But once again,
you play the fool really well.
I think it's a
maybe it's not an act. Maybe it's just who you are.
Well, first of all, I know how smart you actually are. I mean, you truly are in a million different ways. But number two is I think that it's also ungenerous to say the dumb position because I don't think it's dumb. I think that these are complicated topics. Right. You're being very facetious when you use that.
Let's jump into some definitions. Let's get this rolling.
Okay.
So let's do it. How do we define trigger?
So trigger, I mean, basically trigger is stimulus response. Okay. So you have a stimulus towards something and there's going to be a response to that stimulus. That's basically what the word trigger means in every single, like whether you're talking about a button that triggers an action, whether or not you're talking about a line of code that triggers like an exe, or, that the computer like now responds to, or whether you're talking about it in a psychological realm. It's a situation, it's a stimulus that has now created a reaction or response.
Okay.
So in a psychological sort of context, the definition in a psychological context is a stimulation that causes a reaction, often an adverse emotional response or reaction.
Okay.
So the assumption is that the response, like if you're getting triggered, the assumption is that whatever stimulated it, whatever was like the cause of it, like the first domino, created in the other person an adverse emotional response.
Okay.
That's the assumption. That, though, is not the only definition of trigger, even in a psychological context.
Okay.
There are actually probably at least half a dozen to a dozen different ways to talk about a trigger. And you already mentioned one, which is emotional regulation. So I thought I'd list different kinds of psychological triggers so that when somebody says the word trigger, there are like there might be some value in going, what kind of trigger are you talking about?
Yeah, we did an episode on general semantics years ago. Alfred Korzybski, say that word right. Alfred Korzybski has a study of general semantics.
Yes.
And it's like basic things like when you talk about a person that might be homeless, well, not all people with the label homeless are the same type of person. Like one person might be homeless. We talked about the episode because of drug abuse issues. Another person might be homeless because they just lost their job last week and they were living paycheck to paycheck. Right. Another person might be homeless by choice because they decided to be homeless.
Or they're just like a traveler and they just go from cruise ship to cruise ship or whatever.
So we need to define our terms. And Korzybski talks about getting more specific about the things that we define. So what you're really doing here is you're creating some distinction around the types of triggers.
Yes.
Not all of them are created equal.
That's
like
right.
Trigger 1, trigger 2, trigger 3, trigger 4. There's different definitions for these.
Yeah, that's his recommendation. His recommendation is like number the word. And actually, you even saw this. I mean, I think a couple of years ago, and this was years after we recorded the podcast, there was all this not scandal, but all of this kerfuffle about whether or not a person was homeless or houseless, or whether or not they were
create distinction.
They were trying to create distinctions, and so. There's a lot of value to going, well, when we use this word, what exactly are we talking about? And so I want to give and I don't even think this is a comprehensive list. This is just probably I think I have 7 to 8.
The suspense is killing me. Let's do it. Get to it.
Okay.
Let's go.
Different possibilities. All right. My apologies.
No, it's good. Let's just get the pace going. I want to get through this.
Okay. So the first one is cognitive psychology uses the word trigger to indicate something like your memory was triggered by a smell.
The memory triggers.
Or something like a song triggers an emotional state.
Because, we talk about too that shadow isn't always bad.
I'd like to get to shadow in a moment.
But I'm just saying, immediately I'm going, oh yeah, a memory could be a positive trigger. or an
Yeah.
emotional state, like a piece of music or something that could be a memory, could be
Yep.
positive.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be negative.
Well, and to go to the next one, there's positive psychology that talks about triggers as something that is basically something you set up to encourage yourself to get in a better state. So positive psychology also uses the word trigger to indicate something that is uplifting you.
So a state trigger,
Mhm.
a state trigger for positive.
Yep.
Positive state trigger, I'll call it. Okay.
Behavioral psychology uses the word trigger to indicate something that's like kind of, I mean, I guess you could call it Pavlovian. Like your phone vibrates and you immediately look at it to see if there's a notification. So then that's behavioral psychology's
Like
version of a trigger.
trained responses.
Mhm. Yeah,
Okay.
you like pick up a coffee mug or you see a coffee mug and then you just immediately go make coffee, right?
Okay.
So these would be behavioral triggers. There's also, we just talked about emotional regulation, which is a non-traumatic reaction
Yeah.
that is also, a response to stimuli. Like take for example, if somebody criticizes you, that might trigger a feeling of inadequacy. This is
Mhm.
not necessarily trauma related. It's just a piece of criticism might make you feel bad about yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not like, and you don't have to have a big story around trauma. It's just that's the human response to that.
Yeah,
Or-
like me not putting the equipment away or something. It's like, I feel bad. I wish I'd done that. So I didn't
Right.
have this extra hassle today. It's just like little stuff like that.
Yeah, and the other side could be like praise triggers a sense of validation or joy, right?
Yeah.
So these are also definitions of trigger. In systems thinking, which I like to refer to a lot, systems thinking has the word trigger as basically, like you set up a scene or a system, and the trigger is what causes the system to go and produce the results that you're looking for. So we use systems thinking all the time, and a trigger is basically whatever it was that, like created the feedback loop that helped you get the chain reaction of responses that you're looking for. Or environmental changes trigger adaptive behaviors. So that's another word for trigger. And these are all in psychology, by the way. Developmental psychology talks about significant life changes can trigger like the next, what you could call like Ericksonian, level of your life. Like
Yeah.
what is the next thing that I'm supposed to be doing in my life? And how could major life changes be the trigger for that? So, you're talking about transcendence in the HAT
Mhm.
model. Transcendence would be a major life event triggers the next phase developmentally.
Yeah.
And so now you're leaving an earlier iteration of yourself and moving to the next iteration of yourself. And that would very much be a transcendence trigger.
So like needing reading glasses at my age, I'm like, okay, I'm entering another phase. It's triggering a bunch of psychology for me to go, okay, what does it mean to be middle-aged now that I need reading glasses, et cetera, et cetera. That you're talking about that kind of a trigger.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe
Menopause, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Something.
Yeah, or even you get laid off and it triggers a midlife crisis.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Which most midlife crisis is just midlife. Right. Like I'm realizing this. I'm
We call it a
realizing
crisis. But
we
it's just,
call it a crisis, but it's actually just midlife. It's kind of like, it would be funny if we called puberty like,
adolescent crisis.
Huh?
Adolescent crisis.
Yeah, like a crisis.
But it kind of is.
It kind of is, yeah.
It is an adolescent crisis, if you will.
It's a crisis of your body and your hormone, like a hormonal crisis, basically.
Yeah.
If we called puberty hormonal crisis, that's basically like calling midlife crisis. It's not a crisis, it's a time period of massive reevaluation that you just naturally enter.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, most of the developmental psychology, like Erickson and that sort of thing, most of them end by the age of 25. Carl Jung, to go back to Jungian psychology, was one of the very few people researching midlife as its own developmental level. So there's a bunch of stuff that comes along with that too. So developmental psychology uses the word trigger to indicate, like we were talking about before, a transcendence component. And then there's like social psychology, like what triggers behavior in mass, like a meme could maybe trigger a bunch of people going online to go look at the meme or whatever. So there's also triggering behavior, as a collective. So even
Speaking
in
of which,
psychology,
right now, if you're
Oh, yeah.
listening or watching, that's your trigger to go make a comment or do a like or something. Go ahead.
You could do that. Yeah, absolutely. We're hoping that this entire episode will trigger
Sorry.
you to want to like, subscribe, and hit bells or whatever, or whatever you're supposed
The
to be
bell,
doing.
which is a trigger of its own.
That's right.
Ding! There's a
Ding.
new episode.
Yeah, I got
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail you. I know you're on a serious run.
You know,
and I was trying to be goofy and more bantery.
What I find so funny is that whenever I'm not getting to the subject, you keep hurrying me along, and whenever I am getting to the subject, you're derailing me.
I guess I'm just a control freak. or either I'm a joker or a control freak. Either I'm trying to disable everything or disrupt everything.
Oppositional personality disorder.
Is that what it is? I'm just contrarian on
You're
all
just
these.
contrarian, I guess.
Okay,
Anyway,
so these are some of the triggers. Where does traumatic trigger? Like, I mean, none of these are specifically trauma.
no, I was talking about triggers in psychology that are used as terms that
see.
are going outside of traumatic triggers.
Gotcha. So that would be
Because-
another one of them too.
Yeah,
then.
that's another
Okay,
one,
okay,
right?
gotcha.
Absolutely. In fact, I think we addressed that in the beginning.
Yeah.
And so trauma related triggers are physical, emotional, and oftentimes behavioral. So the physical ones are maybe you start sweating,
Mhm.
right? If you get triggered around a trauma. And trauma can be capital T trauma or lowercase t trauma. You know, it's like it could be something that's like set as a major part of your life story
Yeah.
from childhood. That would be a capital T trauma. Or it could be something that you just like had a really bad run-in with.
Yeah.
And so now you don't want to experience that again. And so that's a lowercase t trauma. And so traumas that are psychologically like, or excuse me, triggers that are clicked or sort of pushed based on trauma have some predictable patterns to them. And again, they can be physical, you know, like breathing heavy,
Yeah.
right? They can be emotional, like going to, you know, like anger, shame, fear, you know, the basic responses. Or they can be behavioral, like trying to flee or trying to push something away or, you know, maybe, I don't know, acting out, being defensive, etc. And so those are some of the behavioral triggers. So the word trigger, I think the reason why I mention all of this again is that we use the word so casually that the assumption is always that what is being talked about is a capital T trauma response.
Yeah.
And not all triggers are capital T trauma responses.
Yeah. So with that definition or these definitions, every piece of content probably needs a trigger warning on it. Because something's going to, I mean, all like positive, negative,
Right.
sideline, like
Right. Exactly.
we're being triggered all the time for certain things. So trigger warning doesn't really mean anything, except it's been hijacked. It means traumatic trigger, and that's all it can mean in that context.
Yeah. When people say trigger warning, they usually mean trauma related.
Like they're not talking
potential.
about, they're not talking about state triggers or like systemic thinking triggers. They're talking about trauma and the response to that.
Right. So, but at the same time, I don't know if we are still merging some of these together.
Okay.
Even if the person believes they're talking about triggers that are trauma related, you know, like that's the assumption, they could actually be talking about emotional regulation.
Yeah.
Right. Or they could be talking about, you know, like your basic behavioral trigger.
Yeah.
They could be talking about something that isn't trauma related, but still acting as if it is.
Yeah.
So a person who is poor at emotional regulation, not necessarily because they were traumatized through some sort of like victimization or exploitation or something terrible that happened to them, but maybe they were a person who just like never was expected to show up in a more adult way. Like, I mean, to me, you could call that a form of, you know, I don't know. Sometimes people call that abuse because the parent didn't like train the child to be fit for life or they spoiled them. But I don't know if, you know, like mild spoiling is necessarily a trauma related response, but it is definitely a person who will have trouble with emotional regulation out and out, you know, out and about. And so the person might assume that that is somebody who's dealing with something trauma related when it's really just emotional regulation.
Yeah.
So, or somebody who's dealing with maybe, you know, like your basic, developmental psychology, which is you're ready to mature, you're ready to move on to the next level. And in part, that's what we oftentimes are talking about. We're talking about triggers in your life that point to a need to go to the next level. So oftentimes ours is a developmental, you know, sort of component to it.
Achievement.
Yeah, more achievement oriented
Than healing.
But sometimes it's healing as well. And so so let's now go to the second piece of this, which is how are we defining shadow so that when we say if you get triggered, there could be valuable shadow content in there. What do we mean by valuable shadow content?
Yes. And before we go there, I just want to make it very clear to you listening right now, we're not saying all situations would bring up shadow material you need to look at. There are situations when you're triggered and there's a trauma response or there's healing needs to be done, you need professional counseling or therapy or help. We believe in clinical therapy, and we think that certain people, that could be very valuable for you. And in fact, I think a therapist can help you determine whether this is material needs to be healed from or whether it needs to be achieved through, most likely.
I think going to a therapist is basically the same thing. They're going to be diving into your shadow,
Yeah.
whether they know it or you know it or not.
Yeah.
Right.
But I just want to make sure we're not saying to sideline therapy or getting help professionally.
Mm-mm.
If you need help professionally and you're struggling with something, please go get that help. I think that is absolutely necessary. But we're also going to talk about other opportunities might be available to you outside of professional help and therapy as well.
Yeah.
And let's dive in the shadow and talk about those.
Right. Well, because I mean, honestly, while therapy can be incredibly helpful, it can also be very counterproductive. Like
Sometimes.
I mean, more often than we would wish.
Yeah.
More often than we would wish. I mean, I know plenty of great therapists who have helped people. I mean, I started my personal development journey on, with therapy.
Yeah.
And I'm super happy that I did because I had a great therapist. Not everybody has a great therapist. And so sometimes we have to do the work in-house too. So understanding how these tools work. And I know you're basically trying to make it so that it's like, we're not saying that if you have a trauma-related response to something and you get triggered, it's all your fault and bring it all in-house. In fact, one could argue that very little of this is our fault. In fact, one could argue that like nothing is our fault except for what we do after, after the experience. So anyway, so let's go back to the main topic, which is triggers can help us unearth shadow material.
Mm-hmm.
And then the question is, if somebody takes that position, are they necessarily victim blaming?
Mm-hmm.
So to define the shadow is basically anything about yourself that you were unaware of, which is another way of saying unprocessed material.
Yeah.
Right. The shadow is filled with unprocessed material. What is unprocessed material? So in the world of Jungian complexes, which complexes is all about like getting to unprocessed material, when something is throttling your ability to choose your behavior. Unprocessed material is like experiences that have been left unprocessed. What is that? Well, that's a memory. It's a memory that you're not visiting. You're not revisiting. You're not trying to figure out what this meant for you. When you go back to the memory, maybe you're reframing it and seeing it from a different angle or putting a positive spin on it or trying to figure out why it served you or whatever. But you aren't necessarily like sitting with the experience and trying to figure out like how it forged you, how it shaped you. And for a lot of people, sometimes just not reliving a traumatic experience, but just going through what actually happened without having a bunch of, story and narrative placed on top of it can all by itself be highly cathartic. So unprocessed material are experiences that we have not revisited and understood the meaning of, like the full implication of. Unprocessed material are also emotions that are stuck inside of us, very much in that sort of, feelings buried alive, never dies sort of way. Unprocessed material are our emotions that are waiting for us to give them attention and do a full processing on them, right? And we can do that. We can process our emotions through, a wide variety of techniques. They're thoughts that are unprocessed. So how we actually think about something, how we've been programmed to think, whether or not our beliefs are serving us, whether or not they're like limiting, or whether or not they are, like just ideas about the world that maybe are creating some cognitive dissonance within us. And then finally, it's the patterns and the meanings and the wishes that remain unprocessed. And you can kind of, if you're into, cognitive functions, you can kind of chart, unprocessed material falls in the realm of like introverted sensing or experiences or memories. Introverted feelings are emotions or feelings about something and how they defined us. What's stuck inside of us that is causing us to behave in certain ways with intentions and motivations that we might be blind to. What are our thoughts or introverted thinking, right? Like the cognitive dissonance we might be experiencing and how we're talking to ourselves and limiting beliefs, or just any position we take, any opinion we take that hasn't fully been thought through. And then our meanings, our patterns, our wishes, this would be our introverted intuition, our ability to reframe something or to see it from a different angle in order to fully understand it. So one could say that our shadow is filled with unprocessed material from our introverted functions that then can send over a signal to our extroverted functions to have us act out in certain ways, right? Behave in certain ways. And then sometimes gather even more material that remains unprocessed. So the shadow is effectively just like anything about yourself that you are unaware of that is waiting for you to see it and process it. So when we say things like a trigger is an opportunity to look at the shadow, I think this can be um, sort of misdefined because I
Yeah.
think a lot of times people say the shadow is our darkest part because the shadow is a dark part, right? It's dark by definition.
Yeah.
So when we say the darkest part, the assumption is the evilest part or the worst part or the meanest part, but it's actually dark in the sense of unseen, not dark in the sense of evil, not dark in
Yeah.
the sense of doing like with bad intent.
I don't think we're also connecting trigger to shadow directly, because at this point, if you truly did hang up the phone or slam the door, I'm not unaware of how I feel about that. In fact, I've got years of thinking about it and healing it. I'm very aware of it. And if it still triggers me, it's not shadow material anymore. My ego is getting triggered in that moment.
Right.
So I think we need to talk about too that our triggers can be connected to our ego or our shadow. Things I'm very aware of, I know trigger me and they trigger me right there. And things I'm not aware of that why did I act that way? Holy crap.
Well, and I mean, I might just kind of quibble a little bit there because I think you're mostly right, but I think there's just like a little
Yeah.
tiny sort of,
Please.
I don't know, like a little a little tiny bit of clarification.
You have
I'd put.
introverted thinking as your primary way of judging the world. And so distinctions, definitions,
That's
and
right.
extreme nuance
Nobody else is ever 100%
of clarity.
right.
But just
Can I just
not
tweak
exactly. Well, actually,
which is my favorite
that's like the most
introverted thinking meme
well,
ever.
actually, you push the glasses up on the
That's right.
nose.
Right. So let me just, you're just a tiny bit.
Please do.
So this idea that at this point the content is you're aware of it and so now it falls in the ego. I would say that's primarily true. That said, the original point of origin of the trigger, to go back to which I think is a great example actually, because you actually legitimately had trauma in your first
Oh
marriage.
yeah, this is a big deal for us in the early days. I mean,
That's
it's
right.
not so much now. I'm
Yeah.
amping it up for the sake of the show.
Yeah.
But
It's not actually. We actually have figured that dance out pretty well because it was such
Yeah.
a big deal.
there's other stuff we could deal with now. But
Yeah,
let's
tons of other
stay
stuff.
with this one because this one's good.
Okay, and we solved this one mostly. So let's do the positive example or the example that we've navigated our way
Yeah.
to the other side. So what would happen in that situation is because I have extroverted feeling or harmony as my 10-year-old or tertiary function, as somebody with ENTP preferences, I don't do this for everybody. I have actually become a much more sensitive now that I'm older. I've become
Yeah.
much more empathic because of the work I do. I'm a harmonizing subtype. I do a lot of coaching. We do a lot of energetic work in like personality life path. And so I
Yeah.
have become far more empathic as an adult than I ever was when I was younger.
Yeah.
But I've always been kind of empathic. And by empathic, I mean like slurping in other people's emotions into myself. I've always been kind of that way for anybody that I was in a strong relationship with. So like my
Yeah.
family, like
But-
my immediate family.
You weren't in a strong relationship with Sally Struthers, though.
Well,
But
that's
you were
true.
empathetic for those commercials back in the 90s, right? The
Well,
80s and 90s?
Yeah. So what Joel is referring to is that back in the 80s and 90s, there were these commercials with starving children in other countries. And Sally Struthers, who was the actress that was in, I don't even remember what show she was in, she would like come and make a plea for, people to send money
Yeah.
to help feed these needy children. And even when I was really young, I'd get very distraught around this. I would be like,
Yeah.
I'd just ask my dad if I could, send money somehow or whatever, because I would be so distraught around the images of children who were starving. Yeah, for sure.
So you have empathy beyond just people you know. I'm trying to give you some credit here.
But I'm using empathy very specifically to mean slurping up other people's emotions in
Sure.
real time. I'm
Sure.
very specifically using it in that context, like an empath.
Where it makes you feel like you need to do something right now about it with that person.
Right.
Right. Kind of what you did with your dad, but more in a very visceral way. Like, oh, I need to attend. Joel's upset. He's a person I love in my life, or my daughter Piper's upset. And so I got to do something about this.
Yeah, I mean, you could say it that way. I would also say that the way that I experience it is their emotion is now inside of me.
Yeah.
and I don't know what to do about that.
Almost like you're getting triggered by it.
Well, I would actually say I would be full of their emotion.
Yeah.
That's how I experience it. I become full with their emotion. And because introverted feeling or authenticity is a bit of a blind spot for me, it's a weakness, it's my seventh function. I do not have, like I said, when I get really emotional regulation is not usually my issue. But when it is an issue, I don't know what to do about it, or at
Yeah.
least traditionally I have not. So explosions were very common. So there in these moments, we would be in a fight. We would be in some sort of like impassioned argument, heated.
Yeah.
We'd be talking about whatever it was we were talking about.
Very
And
bored at the time.
and if you got emotionally spiked for any reason, especially if you were frustrated or angry or whatever, I would slurp up your emotion inside of me and then I would be filled with it. Does that make sense? It's like I'd be full of an emotion.
Almost blinded by it.
Well, it became blinding because my thinking function shuts off as my emotion increases. Like for other people, sometimes intense emotion actually helps them create more clarity of thought. I am the exact opposite. And I think it's because introverted thinking or accuracy is the opposite of extroverted feeling or harmony. So the more emotional I am, the less, I mean, like I almost become so stupid. Or not stupid, but I become, well,
Non-thinking.
I become like completely inarticulate. So we'd be in the middle of a battle. I learned this phenomena and from our arguments, and I went out and asked a bunch of other people if this was the case for them, and I think this is basically true. Um, the emotion would be baked into the scene or the room that we're in, or maybe we were in the car arguing or whatever, but it would be baked into the room. So I think for extroverted feeling or harmony, I think location is tied to emotion. Like the emotion lives in the location that the emotion is being expressed.
Yeah.
So if I leave a room, like if I'm fighting in a room and I just exit the room, all I have to do is like go 5 or 10 feet outside of the room. The emotion is left in the room of the battle, like where it was baked, like almost like it's like that's the oven. And so the heat stays in the oven. And if I can just leave, I can feel the emotion draining out of me very quickly oftentimes. I can go for like a 2 to 5 minute walk or whatever. And on the other side of it, I get my brain back. I get to think. But I would be so filled with an emotion, I was almost like non-lingual. I couldn't even tell you. I couldn't even express or say, I can't think. Like that's what I was experiencing, but I couldn't say it. I can't think. I need to leave in order to be able to think. I couldn't even use those words because I was so full of emotion. So what I would do is I would leave the room so that I could go get my brain back. And you would think, oh, this is just like my first marriage where if she leaves the room, we'll never talk about this again. We'll never have any reconciliation. We'll never come to any meeting of minds.
Yeah.
We're just going to be fighting about this and leaving it unresolved for eternity. So you'd follow me. And unfortunately, it was almost like the oven with the heat. It didn't stay in the room now. Now it was following me. And so the proximity of you and me in that battle meant that I couldn't think. I just I couldn't get far enough away so that I could get my brain back. And it turned into these like epic problem. It was such an epic problem for us. For so long, it was an epic problem. Eventually we realized, oh, that's the dance that's going on. Like in the moments when we weren't fighting, I was like later on, I was just like, what is even happening there? So we had a conversation and I was like, and so I explained to you what I thought was going on.
Yeah.
And you explained, oh, I think what's happening. And then like now we're getting into shadow content because it was through those conversations. It was through we were both triggered like crazy. It was post-processing those triggers that had you going, I think I'm projecting onto you something that was happening from my first marriage. That was totally shadow content. That was unprocessed material from your first marriage that you had not contended with at all. And so in the early days, you were bringing like the trigger was very valuable to go back and go, this is what happened to me. This is what remains unprocessed. I still have a fear of it. Like you're getting emotional about something that isn't happening, but you're bringing it into a moment in part to process it. And I think that this is what like Harville Hendrix talks about with imago relationships. It's like we were recreating scenarios from our past in order to process what happened, not in this moment, but what happened then previously, So we're almost like creating a scenario so that we can finish unfinished business.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so we play out our shadow all the time on each other in relationships because we're trying to complete unfinished business.
Yeah.
So I guess to make a long story short, too late. The point of all of that is eventually you and I used a code word, and I figured out how to say this before I'm so full of an emotion that I can't speak. But I just say, I'm not hanging up the phone. Right. That's our code. Our code of hanging up the phone means we'll never get resolution on this conversation. So
Yeah.
I learned before I was so full, I couldn't even say that. I learned to look at you and say, I'm not hanging up the phone.
Yeah.
And you know that means I'm just about too dumb to continue talking. So you give me tons of space. I leave the room. I get my brain back. It usually gives us a couple minutes to just sort of, calm
Yeah.
down from whatever heated conversation we're having. And then we get right back into it and we can find resolution.
Yeah.
So that was the scenario.
My question would be, that's an external fix for something that's triggering to me.
Mhm.
That wasn't me necessarily dealing with it and overcoming it without your cooperation. So
Mhm.
thank you for that, because that did help. And it continues to help me not feel triggered. I don't feel like it's my problem alone. You're helping me with it.
Mhm.
But it also brings up the question, well, have I actually worked on anything then? If I've come up with an external fix, have I actually looked at my shadow material? Have I actually healed from that? Have I actually worked on anything? If the fix is external, right? Like you had to change your behavior to make it okay for me. But what if you were unwilling or incapable of changing your behavior? Am I screwed?
Mhm.
Am I out of luck? Can I not work on my shadow or heal from that? I mean, I'm begging the question. I believe I can. And in some ways, I'm genuinely asking this to myself. Like, did I have a shortcut or a bypass just then by having the external fix? Because I think a person that says we're victim blaming when we say to look at the shadow would say, yeah, the external fix is what we're actually after. That's
Mhm.
actually what we're wanting, because to have the person have to bring up that trauma or that experience again, it feels like re-victimization or blaming them as the victim, et cetera, et cetera. It is the external world. And we would take it maybe to a physical thing. Like, let's say, you slap me across the face, and one of my parents slapped me across the face when I was a kid, and that brings up a trigger for me. Everybody would agree it's not okay to slap somebody, right? It's like, you got to stop that external behavior. You're not allowed to slap somebody. Well, but it's good for them. It's triggering them to look at their shadow because their parent or guardian slapped them when they were a kid. It's helping them, right? It's like, no, you stop that. That's not okay.
Yeah.
But for some reason, we say it's okay with words and what we say to each other.
Mhm.
We don't necessarily stop those external behaviors, except in this situation, where we did. We had you change your external behavior, and I changed some of my external behavior as well. But the work was out here in the external world. It wasn't, I have done healing, I have done inner work, but one could look at this and go, well, you didn't actually address the inner space, Joel. Maybe you didn't actually see what you need to see there. Maybe it was just covered over by an external fix.
Yeah. So this goes back to your a question about whether or not that became ego work.
Yeah.
Was it still shadow work, or was it ego work at the time that you and I realized what was going on?
Yeah.
Like once we would knew the dance, is it still in your shadow? And I would argue, and this is why I said I want to make a little tiny bit of a tweak there. Your ego, or the part of you that you're aware of. So you can just say ego in Jungian terms. Ego is like, what about us that we're aware of, whether or not we're owning it or disowning it in the moment. What are we aware of about ourselves? And the shadow is, what are we unaware of? And so in the dance, we became aware of it. The triggers that happened in those conversations, they gave us great arrows towards material that we were just simply unaware of. Like, you didn't know that you were bringing in your first relationship into our marriage when you were afraid that I was going to quote unquote hang up the phone. But then you became aware of it. Once you became aware of it, now it entered ego land, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're aware that this is a thing. But what stays in the shadow, and this is why I was like, I'm like 99% agree with you, is the unprocessed material around it.
Yeah.
So the reason why it was frustrating to you wasn't simply that it reminded you of your first marriage and you don't want to think about your first marriage because that's not the relationship you're in now. The reason why it was so triggering to you is because you hadn't fully processed the impact that original series of events had on you.
Not just the impact, but the speculative meaning that it means now in the moment I'm having with you.
That's right.
So like the impact it had, the memory of it, the experience of it, yes, that hadn't been processed fully, but also I don't even know if I was even aware of the meaning of it in the moment of it being ego displayed. Like I wasn't like, wait, the meaning of this is that, oh, this marriage is also going to fail. It's just going to be a slow destruction till the end. We're going to keep fighting more and more until it all breaks apart.
Right.
This is how it starts. Like all that's unconscious. Like the introverted intuition or the
Yes.
like running the simulation of where this is going to head. I'm not actively thinking about that, but all that material is underneath the substrate of what what's happening in the moment.
That's right.
And I'm going, like in my unconscious, I'm laying out the blocks. I know exactly what's going to happen, exactly what's going to happen, quote unquote, because I can just see it because that's what happened last time.
Yeah.
And I'm patterning what's going to happen this time. And I'm just,
that's right.
So I'm responding in kind, but I'm not aware of any of that running underneath the surface until I keep having it just, and it probably had to be shown to me maybe 30 times, 20 times before I could see all of it. And I probably haven't seen all of it yet.
Right.
Like I'm sure there's still material I haven't seen about it.
Well, and it's your job on your own time to go process that out.
Yeah.
Because it's introverted work. It's introverted processing work. Now, again, the shadow also encourages us to behave in certain ways that we're blind to. Like take, for example, that you were chasing me down when I needed you to not do that.
Yeah.
And to you were just like, oh, I'm just, in your mind, your ego was, I'm just getting resolution on the conversation.
I'm not going to let this relationship die like my last one.
Right.
Like unconsciously, my motivation is, no, I'm going to fight for this.
That's right.
I'm going to follow her. I'm not going to, I let my last relationship hang up the phone on me. If I let that happen now, that equals death of the relationship. So I can't let that happen. I need to chase her.
That's right.
Let's force resolution. Let's make this happen, which didn't help.
Well, and in some ways there was a bit of a bully. I mean, to go back to sixth function language, extroverted feeling or harmony being your sixth function, which is the witch or cynic's archetypal energy associated with it. If you go back to our, 3-part series on careers, that was you boundary setting. That was you going like, no, you're not allowed. I mean, whether or not it was good or bad boundaries, you're not allowed to walk away.
It's at least an attempt.
You're not allowed to allow discord to continue. I'm going to force some form of harmony. I'm going to force resolution in the relationship. And so it triggered shadow behavior, right? Even though that was extroverted. But in your mind, you were just thinking, you weren't even thinking any of this. Like none of this is conscious. So once we realized it was, so then the question becomes, is it still shadow material? And I would argue, until me leaving has zero impact on you, like the day you and I are quote unquote fighting and I leave the room and you just wait for me to return, then we will know that it's no longer shadow material because there's no unprocessed material. And I would actually argue that we're kind of there. like basically that's what it feels like happens. You and I get heated. I leave the room. You patiently wait for me to return. I return in about 3 minutes. We resume the conversation. Like that's basically how it works now. So at this point, I would say it's no longer shadow material for you.
So I'm going to ask a question now. Isn't that victim blaming then? It's my responsibility as the victim to not get triggered by your actions. Is that my responsibility? And aren't you just blaming me for being triggered that way? Joel, you'll know once you're no longer triggered and I leave the room that everything's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think this is the important distinction, right? Of this entire conversation. This is probably all kind of leading up to this. And I would say that if a situation, you mentioned the phrase re-victimization.
Yeah.
And this, I would say that this goes back to when I was talking about how like we're waiting for life. We can either wait for life to give us the ideal circumstances to learn the lesson we need to learn because it's just a little out of our comfort zone, but not too heavy a lift for us not to get the right lessons. We can either do that or we can create the context ourselves to help learn those lessons and watch ourselves make progress over time. We can kind of take that in our own hands. Re-victimization is when it's too heavy of a lift for the person. Like that, they're not that trigger, right? The thing that is the catalyst that brought up whatever emotional distress or physical distress or behavioral responses that leads them back to remembering trauma. And oftentimes this is like trauma with a capital T.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's lowercase. In that situation, whatever was the stimulus was too heavy a lift for the person in the moment to be able to make it meaningful in any other way other than just re-traumatizing them, like re-victimizing.
So a child who experiences something traumatic doesn't have the resource or maturity to deal with that. And later in life, if that person as an adult is quote unquote re-traumatized
Mhm.
about that, it means that they're put in the same state they were when the trauma happened.
Yeah.
And by definition, they also don't have the resource or maturity to deal with it now.
Yeah, I mean, this is like basically the point of origin for the
Yeah,
concept of PTSD was shell shocked.
sure.
Like a person, like a teenager basically, or a young 20-something-year-old man entered war, what like watched friends die around him, like maybe had to take life himself, and
Yeah,
and like heard the shells going off around him,
yeah,
then would go to like a 4th of July celebration and then be massively re-traumatized by fireworks.
yes,
Right. And it's like that person, that was just too heavy a lift for that person.
sure.
That was just beyond their capacity to like use the material in any sort of like, personal development way.
So could we say then somebody though that was traumatized or had something happen to them in one context earlier in the life when they didn't have the resource to deal with it, and it happens again, they're triggered now, but they're now in a context where they have some maturity or resource to deal with it. Maybe that's where the distinction is. Maybe that's where we could say that's not victim blaming. That is actually asking the person to use the resources they now have to address the same challenge in a new light. Is that kind of the distinction we're creating?
Well, what it is it's even if a person is like quote unquote shell shocked, at the time that the fireworks go off and it triggers this massive like,
Like,
PTSD
yeah,
response in a soldier. In the moment it's happening, there's nothing that can be done. There's no personal development work that's happening in that moment.
it's a
Right.
stimulus that's causing a reaction.
That's right. Yeah. And you just have to write it out in whatever way. And hopefully it ends faster than, sooner than later.
Yeah.
But and I would actually argue this is all personal development. It's in the quiet times, right? Like you and I in the dance that we did with the hanging up the phone scenario, it wasn't in the middle of the fight that we figured it out. It was later on when we were reflecting on why did that fight go so badly? Why did it explode? Why was the emotional response like sort of exponential for the, like whatever the original fight was, which quite frankly, I don't even remember what we were fighting about in any of those scenarios or situations. So they clearly weren't like game changers or anything.
Yeah.
We were just fighting. We were just a couple having a fight. But the emotion was disproportionate to the situation. So in the later on when we were reflecting back, like why do those turn so ugly? Why do those turn so bad? Uh, the It was in the quiet time that it was like, oh, I have some reflection I need to do, and you have some reflection that you need to do. Like we both have unprocessed material here that we need to figure out.
Yeah.
And by doing it in the quiet times, it meant that later on when we were in the same scenario in a fight, we could improve the quality of those fights, so to speak. We could get better at them until, like you said, 20 or 30 times later, eventually we got to a point where we just know the drill, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm emotionally filled. I can't speak anymore, I think. I say, I'm not hanging up the phone. I walk out of the room. You give me a couple minutes. I come back and then we resume. Right. That's where we're at now. But we would have never been able to do that had we not done processing work in the quiet times from the fight that triggered the awareness that we needed to do processing
Yeah.
work in the shadow.
But I guess what I'm saying is if I wasn't able to do that processing work because I didn't have any more resource or maturity to deal with it, I was still in the same state that the trauma was created in.
Mhm.
That's where maybe it's inappropriate to say, look at your shadow and see it because I don't have the resource to do it in that moment.
Yes.
So the person that's saying we're victim blaming in a situation where they don't have the resource to deal with the thing that's coming up for them
Mhm.
or the maturity to deal with it, I think that is appropriate to say, yeah, maybe we shouldn't see that as a valid trigger. I
Well,
guess I'm trying to come down to
yeah.
a place to know if I'm triggered in life, the person listening right now, I'm trying to land this to say, how do I know if this is something that I should see as something, okay, there's actual material here that I can now readdress in the new state I'm in, or I'm still in a state that this was created in and I need either professional help or I should push it away for now because it's just too traumatizing.
Well, but the point of professional help is to get to a place where you can process the material.
Sure.
So it kind of doesn't matter. Does that make sense? It's like it kind of doesn't matter where you're at in all of it. It's still on us as an individual to do whatever processing work we need to do to get to the other side of it.
So then somebody's doing something online and I have the ability to block them or leave them unblocked and go get therapy, a lot of people would say, just block them. Don't allow that re-traumatization to happen.
Right.
And that's a very valid strategy for a lot of people. Are you saying that's, you're not saying this wholesale, but are you saying that's a little bit risky because maybe you're not giving yourself the opportunity to now go get the therapy for the triggers that are coming up? Or are you
well,
because I know that's a strategy. People they eliminate things in the external world so they don't have to feel anything.
Right.
And there's validity to that, but only up to a certain point.
Right.
And so where is that line? It's subjective for each person. But how do I, as a person, if I'm listening right now, determine that for myself?
Well, if you're blocking because you don't want to get triggered by something, then the very fact that you're blocking something to avoid a trigger means that there's unprocessed material in there that should be addressed in some way.
Sure.
And it's either you're ready to address that material on your own, and then later on you would no longer need the block. You wouldn't need to block it because it would no longer be triggering you.
Sure.
So it's either that you go process the material so that the trigger no longer exists, or you do whatever work you need to do to become the kind of person that can process that material. And the block stays in place for longer because you've got a longer road ahead of you. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's like, and only you can determine that.
Yes.
But at no point is it like, well, this person didn't ask to be traumatized, so therefore we just never do anything, like we walk on eggshells. And I think that's been the insinuation. It's like, always put a trigger warning, always make sure that people are, really aware that this could be something that triggers them. And as if triggering somebody is the worst thing you can do for them.
They were covering statues in New York City.
Right.
Because people said, I walk down the street and I'm triggered by the imagery.
Right.
I didn't give consent to see that imagery in that statue.
Yeah.
I need it covered and out of my view so I'm not triggered.
Yes.
I disagree with this. I'm like, you should be able to have things expressed in the world and people need to just accommodate for that. I don't think that we're suggesting that we eliminate things in the external world for people, right? Like that wouldn't be very healthy for all of us.
Well, there's a couple different things that saying that getting triggered in the way that we're talking about, like the emotionally triggered from trauma element.
Yeah.
There's a couple different things that that saying it's useful is doing and it's not doing. The first thing is that what it is doing is it's saying that triggers are an opportunity for introspection. It is saying that. It's an opportunity for introspection. But introspection is not the same as blame.
Yeah.
And if a person believes that anytime you go inside to try to figure out what it means for you, that blame is always associated with it, that's actually, that's all by itself something that needs to be processed.
Yes.
Like, why is introspection always associated with blame? Why is taking responsibility always associated, like taking responsibility for the healing, the same as saying you're taking responsibility for the original
action?
Yeah. Right. And it's not. Those two things are not the same. Like there are plenty of times where we have to step up and take responsibility for a mess somebody else made. Right. It's like, well, I have to do that because I've got to be, I'm the adult in the situation, or I'm the person who's going to have to live with that. So I'm going to have to take responsibility for how I navigate through it.
We could see it as a stall out on the grieving cycle of denial.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it could just be a person in the middle of the grieving cycle and they've just stuck in denial for an indefinite period of time, maybe the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's how I would see that. Maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're just kind of like you're allowing yourself to be in stasis.
Yeah.
Through processing the material. And you're, by the way, you're allowed to do that.
Sure.
Like anybody, like this is your ride, right? Like if this is everybody's ride, they can do whatever they want to. If they want to like just be triggered for the rest of their life around trauma from the past, they're allowed to do that. It's not advisable because you're going to have a more difficult life because the world kind of won't bend to us. That's one of the reasons why taking responsibility and going, what do I need to do to get to the other side of this?
Yeah.
Is about the most empowered action a person can take. And it's not victim blaming at all. Taking responsibility for something is not the same thing as blaming yourself for it. Those two things are not synonymous. And it's also not saying that you're not going to do anything about it in the outside world, meaning that you can take responsibility for the things that have happened, not taking responsibility for what happened to you, but taking responsibility for the processing work you need to do now in order to get to the other side of it is not the same as saying, and then everybody else gets to do whatever they want to.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, the processing work on trauma is going and confronting their abuser.
Sure.
That's very common. Like you don't have to do that. But for a lot of people, that's part of the process.
So
Is saying like, and creating really strong boundaries and
Yeah.
going, I'm never going to allow that to happen again.
we're going a little long because I'm digging into this a little bit deeper just to make sure there's some distinctions made. So I think what I hear you saying is like, if I get my arm broken by somebody, let's say I'm playing baseball and somebody runs into me and traumatizes me and breaks my arm as a kid,
Mhm.
and the doctor forgets to set that and the bone's a little crooked and it doesn't heal properly.
Mhm.
What you're saying is I shouldn't take responsibility for the person that ran into me. Like, that's not my fault.
Right.
I was a victim to the situation that happened. Somebody slammed into me and broke my arm, and the doctor didn't do a good job. They set my bone incorrectly and it healed improperly. And I shouldn't take responsibility for the doctor's actions either. So the person that broke my arm, that ran into me, broke my arm, that's not my fault. The doctor that set my arm incorrectly is not my fault.
Right.
But I'm in pain.
Right.
And it's been 2 decades. It's 20 years later, and I'm in pain. And I say, if I take responsibility to fix my arm that's broken, where they may have to actually re-break it and reset it and fuse it, or I don't know what a doctor would do in that situation, but let's just say there was a way to fix it. By taking responsibility and driving myself to the doctor to ask them to fix this, I'm victim blaming myself. That's basically what you're saying. It'd be that's as ridiculous as to say taking responsibility to heal our emotional
Right.
or mental state.
Right.
It would be just as ridiculous to say I'm victim blaming by going and getting this fixed now. Well, no, it's the doctor's fault and the person that ran into you's fault. Like, you're taking this on yourself. You shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
That's inappropriate to take that upon yourself, to take responsibility. You should just, I'm not sure what they would say if it's an emotional or mental realm, like just keep it feeling awful and not like address it. Or maybe the person saying they're sorry would fix it. I don't know how a person that would feel that way, like in the arm situation,
Yeah.
how they would feel mentally or emotionally, because I just can't see it in myself. I don't know, right?
Well,
I just don't know how I would do that.
And the alternative is just to tell everybody that you have a susceptible arm and everybody needs to be super careful around you all the time. And
This
so
is probably why we have so many mental disorders.
well, and you
because
can't-
then we could just be left. I have a disorder. You have to leave me alone.
well, to go back to the
Sorry,
arm.
I'm gonna get myself in trouble with that one.
Yeah, you totally are. You're absolutely going
I'm
to
gonna get so much trouble with that one.
So much trouble. But I mean, not that all mental disorders are this, but going back to Krzyzewski,
Yeah,
not all homelessness is the same. Not all
Yeah.
triggers are the same. Not all disorders are the same.
yeah,
All right. You've got disorders you can do nothing about, and you've got disorders you can do quite a bit about, and you're
Yeah.
just not. So there's it runs the gamut.
yeah,
That said, in the case of the arm, you can just tell everybody that you have a susceptible arm and everybody has to like give you wide berth and walk way around you.
sure.
But what do you do if you have to get in a subway and there's a bunch of people there, right? Like you can't control all circumstances or situations, or I guess you can just, prevent yourself from living the kinds of experiences that would require a crowd. Or you can do what you're talking about. So
Yeah.
you can either try to control the environment to honor your susceptible arm, right? Your vulnerable arm, or you can go do the hard work of getting it reset and allowing the body to heal itself right. And now you don't have to avoid everything. Now, if a person
Yeah.
is still dealing with a bunch of other trauma related to that, they might not, or maybe they're just not in a position, like you said, they're not resourced. Maybe they don't have the money to go get the arm reset. Maybe they don't have the money for the physical therapy. Maybe they're just not in a position to.
Yeah,
And in the meantime, because they're not resourced to do it, and only they know their actual circumstances, it's appropriate in the meantime to request people be kind to you during this time period of healing or this time period of vulnerability. That's appropriate. But the smarter play or the smartest play is to go get resourced so you can go get that physical therapy. So
Yeah.
you become the kind of person that can afford the physical therapy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's like you got to do what you got to do to get yourself to the other side. So you can request that the world walk way around you, which it may or may not do. And if it doesn't, you can get really upset at the world for not walking way around you, but you're still in pain because it didn't.
Yeah.
Or you can do whatever it takes to get to the other side of it, maybe taking years to first get insurance, to get the kind of job that gets you insurance, that allows you to, have this kind of elective procedure or whatever it is. Whatever you have to do to get to the other side. So now on the other side of it, you don't have to worry about it. You don't even have to think about it. You don't have to make any requests. You're just done. And now you can just live whatever full life you want to. You can make any choice as a human being. You can make the choice to request everybody walk way around you. You can make the choice to not become the kind of person who can afford it. You can make the choice to become the kind of person who affords it and then get to the other side. You're allowed to do whatever you want to. but one is definitely the more empowered place. One is the place of personal development. One is the place of accelerated maturity, and the other one is not. So when we say things like triggers are an opportunity for you to look at shadow content, in fact, every trigger is an opportunity for you to look at shadow content. We're not saying you deserved the trauma. You deserve the thing that made you get triggered. That in every circumstance or situation, you will be ready for the information or the content. That, like that you got to stop everything, stop the presses and go do that work. We're not saying any of that.
It wasn't your fault necessarily.
We're not saying it was your fault.
Yeah.
We're not saying that you should blame yourself. We're not saying that you should allow it to happen again. We're not saying that everybody else is, like everybody else is pure and you're at fault. But we are saying that every time you have a trigger, there is unprocessed material in there that you are unaware of. And in the case of us fighting, you were aware of the dance, but that doesn't mean you were aware of every square inch of the unprocessed material, right? Like whatever is unprocessed stays unprocessed until it's not. And then the moment that it's not unprocessed, now the trigger doesn't exist. That's how you know. That's how you know that you no longer have unprocessed material in your shadow because the trigger doesn't exist anymore. So in some ways, they are one-to-one. They are like a one-to-one correlation. Shadow material, though, is not you being at your worst. It's not the bad part of you. It's not the dark part of you. It's not this evil part of you. It's the part of you that you're unaware of. And we tend to have behaviors live in the shadow that are less than ideal because we don't want to see those parts, right? We just want to come and push them away. We don't want to see that we're the kind of person that'll fight dirty.
Yeah.
We don't want to see that we're the kind of person who can like be evilly undermining. That's why those parts tend to live in the shadow. But the moment you go, oh no, yeah, I know that was totally me. I did that. I was underhanded. I was kind of an awful person. It's not shadow material anymore. Now it goes in the ego, right? Especially if you processed it through. And so, so the shadow doesn't mean triggers don't mean that triggers that lead to shadow content don't mean that that you deserved whatever happened to you, and now it's going in. It's bringing up the worst parts of you. All it means is that that there is a catalyst of that is now giving you an opportunity to observe aspects of yourself that you were less familiar with. And the aspects of ourselves that we're less familiar with have unprocessed material. Now, we're all filled, to go back to Jungian complexes, we're all filled with unprocessed material. Tons and tons and tons of it, right? Like, I will never be able to process all the material around ourselves in a single lifetime. It's just not possible. But if the unprocessed material is throttling our ability to act with freedom, if it's in the course that I teach called Personality Dynamics, we talk about the goal is a healthy psyche, and a healthy psyche has choice, right? I want to take this action because it's good for me, but for some reason I'm not. So if you want to take an action that's good for you and you're not taking it, that's what we call throttled, right? You're throttling action. What about you is throttling action? If you're unsure, if you're unclear, if you don't know why, it's almost always unprocessed material. So the only time we have to really go in there and observe this unprocessed material and process it is if it's associated with throttled behavior. It's not a healthy psyche, right? Like we have some work to do. We have some cleanup work to do. And triggers point to that. Triggers point to the unprocessed material that is throttling our behavior. We're not taking an action we want to take. We're taking an action we don't want to take, right? We're having a fight and escalating it and losing our minds with our partner, which is not the thing we wanted to do. We just wanted to get to resolution, but now all of a sudden it's explosive. Like these are the moments that these triggers can go back and point to this, to the shadow material. And this shouldn't be seen as blame. They should be seen as opportunity.
Yeah.
And opportunity does not mean that you have to go from 0 to 60, right? In 5 seconds. You don't have to go from awareness to now healed. That's not even possible. In the case of the arm, how long does it take to fix a broken arm? Months, right? Maybe sometimes years, depending upon how it happened.
Yeah.
So being aware of it and doing the work to get to the other side can even psychologically and emotionally take literally years, but you're on your way. You're doing it. You're getting to the other side where it no longer needs to be protected.
I think it's a great place to start to wrap up.
Okay.
For this.
I know. What has this been, like a 2-hour podcast?
It's been a while, but I just want to, I wanted to spend some time digging into this and asking these questions and creating some distinction. I think this is something on top of people's minds. Of triggers, shadow, the ego. What's my relationship to all these? And I'm curious what yours is too. One of the places to start with all of this, if you're new to personality type especially, but even if you've been in personality type for a while, I really recommend going over to our website, personalityhacker.com, and looking at one of the 16 owner's manuals for the personality types. We've got one for all of the 16 Myers-Briggs types. It's a great place to start a journey because it talks about things like trauma looping, which is kind of getting stuck in this place in a personality. Every personality does this differently. They get into this loop and the behavior is hard to stop. Sometimes people can get triggered there. There's some neurosis that live in what's called our 10-year-old, or technically called our tertiary process for each of us. And so we address some of these ideas. We don't go too deep into the shadow in the owner's manuals yet. I think we're going to be adding some more content there over time. Right now, it's mostly the first 4 cognitive functions in your personality. And that's pretty, if you're new to type, you're like, wait, 4 cognitive functions, what is that? If you've been around type for a while, you probably know what I'm talking about. But we use a car model to make it easy to understand. And I think those owner's manuals are fantastic. So if you're a person that wants to get on this journey, it's one of the first places to start. If you're ready to jump deeper into some of the things we've been talking about, like actually looking and on the hunt for triggers, allowing yourself to see what material, if you want to be brave enough and see what emerges and go through a process of seeing your shadow displayed to you, we have a shadow work program. We call it Personality Life Path Mentorship. It does more than just shadow work, but it tunes into the shadow. We see the unconscious material. We understand our relationship to that. And then we help everybody create a systems map of their life and an action plan to operate that systems map. We do it over 8 weeks with a live event, 3 days, a live event that is either in person or streaming. People report it's life-changing. I mean, we just got through with our profiler training and people were coming out of PLP, our life path mentorship, the shadow work content, and they were raving inside the profiler training ecosystem. There's a bunch of people inside PT now that want to take PLP, Antonia. I don't know if you knew that at the live event. They were talking a lot about it. So those 2 places are a good place to start if you're resonating with some of the things we're talking about here on this episode.
Yeah.
And then I'd love to hear what's coming up for you as we talk about this too. Like what's surfacing for you? How are you thinking about this? We talked about triggers, trauma. We talked about, your shadow. Have you struggled with this? Do you still struggle with this? Do you see it as healing, achievement, transcendence? Some of those triggers maybe you deal with if you're listening. Come over while you're getting that owner's manual and signing up for PLP. Also, make a comment under this episode. Leave a question, a comment, or share your story. I think it's really important we understand where you're coming from. Maybe a story of your life where maybe you're triggered, you overcame it, or where you haven't been able to overcome it and you're still working on it. Or maybe there's something else coming up for you. We want to know. Come over and make your voice heard.
Yeah. And I didn't make this comment at the beginning, but like I said, I don't want to misrepresent the person who left the INFP that left the original comment.
No, it's in good faith.
Yeah, absolutely. And also that, speaking of triggers, right?
Yeah.
Non-emotional trauma triggers, it triggered this conversation. It was like, that's a really interesting idea. Are we victim blaming when we talk about that? And so
it's a good question.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I expect them to come and like clarify what they actually meant. They were like, actually what I meant was this and this and this, and it probably has nothing to do with the conversation. But I'm grateful that they left the comment because then we could talk about what I think is a really, I think it's a very contemporary conversation.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's a conversation of our times. Because we are really invested in mental health in this time period and what creates a healthy psyche. And I guess we just spent who knows how long, 90 minutes, 2 hours talking about it.
It's hard to do on a TikTok reel. Talk about this. I mean, you have to kind of have a conversation and let it emerge over time.
It's long form conversation.
And have the confusion and the unpacking and the definitions. Otherwise, it's not going to really help anyone. You can't do this in a dancing video.
Well,
you just can't.
I can't do it. Somebody might be able to, but I have not cracked the code. That said, if you enjoyed the podcast, you can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts or various Android platforms. If you leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, I'll be super duper happy. I can always tell when I've made this like really pitiful plea for ratings and reviews because we get a couple of them and then it's sort of empty for a while. And then I make my next pitiful plea for a rating and review, and then we'll get a couple more. So I think it's time for me to make another pitiful request for a rating and review because we do these day in, day out. Like every week we've done them
since 2014. We don't advertise. We don't charge for it.
That's right.
Probably should be advertising. Probably should have some kind of a
in the
extra
early days,
bonus.
we're like, we'll never advertise, but I'm like, I don't know, maybe we should start advertising. Now, of course, YouTube advertises in our behalf, right? It just takes over and does it for us.
But basically, this is how you fuel yourself. This is the gas in your engine.
If you want
Antonia.
to see the next podcast, go leave a rating and review, because that's the thing that tells me, oh, maybe somebody's listening and I'm not just sitting down and talking about whatever for.
Because this
who knows
costs
how
us.
long.
This actually literally costs us time, energy, and money to produce these.
It
every
actually
week.
does. Yeah.
They're a loss lead, and they're a way
Mhm.
for us to give and
Yeah.
create content that resonates with you to come over and learn more about what we do.
It actually literally costs us hundreds of dollars a week
Yeah.
to do this podcast
Yeah.
for free.
And so giving a rate or review. That would
So
be awesome.
please give a rating and a review, particularly on Apple Podcasts, because then I know, hey, somebody's listening, and it's like, it's worth time, effort, and life force and all that stuff. So that's my pitiful plea for a review.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, my name is Joel Mark Witt,
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
and we'll talk with you on the next Personality Hacker Podcast.